Hey everyone, this is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to take another look at this week's lunar eclipse in the sign of Pisces, which is coming through today and tomorrow. You will have been feeling this building already to start the week yesterday. It's eclipse season, so a powerful time, and what we're going to do today is refresh on and revisit our horoscopes for the month. I feel like it's always nice to get different takes because every time as an astrologer I do a horoscope, I see a little something different. So we're going to revisit all 12 whole sign horoscopes today, which means you can listen for any sign you want. If you want to listen to your sun sign, just listen to the section on your sun sign. If you want to listen to your rising sign, just pick the sign that is rising in your birth chart. I recommend your rising sign because if you use whole sign houses, that will mean that you're looking at the actual transits through your birth chart from the standpoint of your rising sign. I find that to be the most accurate. But that's because I track my transits all the time through my chart. So anyway, I'm going to talk about 5 key themes first that we will note in all of these horoscopes. I will take one or multiple angles on these horoscopes as we go along, and these themes will cover the way in which I will be looking at them. So we'll just kind of refresh on some of the things we said yesterday, and then I'll go through all 12 whole signs and just say a little something. These aren't going to be like full blown, if you want another whole take, by the way, go back to our monthly horoscopes for September, where Alex, Dana, and I break down your eclipse horoscopes and you get 3 different perspectives. So today is just kind of adding to the, adding to the list of things we've already started saying at the beginning of this month and just continuing with a little refresher. All right. So before I dive into horoscopes for the day, don't forget to like and subscribe. We are over 69,000 subscribers. We're trying to get to 70 by the time of the fall equinox. That's coming up really close. If you listen to the channel and you're not yet subscribed, it's free to do so. It helps us grow the community and business. We really appreciate your support. And I am really looking forward to crossing that threshold because we've doubled our subscriber average per month, which is amazing. So thank you, everybody. Transcripts of any of these daily talks can be found on the website, nightlightastrology.com. 2 things to promote today, and then we'll get into it. One is if you go to the events page and click on live talks, Thursday night, I am giving a talk on Venus through the 12 signs. This is a talk that has to do with your Venus karma. If you want to know more about Venus, the story that she tells, and the lessons that you're here to learn about love, sexuality, relationships, check out this talk. If you can't attend live, you get the recording afterward when you register. The other thing, of course, is our year 1 program, which begins November 16th. Enrollment is now open. The pre-registration sale lasts until October 15th. You have some time to take advantage of our sale prices. At the end of today's video, after I sign off, you can stick around if you want to hear an informational video about the first year program that begins in November. One thing I want to highlight here is that at the bottom, you will find that our program has need-based tuition. So in addition to our sales that last until October 15th, you can use the tuition assistance anytime you want. We have a certain number of spots available for people who basically say, look, I have to work within a fixed budget for whatever reason you have. If you're experiencing financial hardship, you're a single mom, you're on disability, you're retired, you have a fixed income, or you have a tight income, you have to live within your means. We understand that. We don't think astrology should be something that's only available for people with one type of income. So we have tuition assistance available where you pick your price within a variety of different sliding scales that we offer for your monthly tuition. So be sure to check that out, use it. That's what it's there for. We really want to see a lot of different people and a lot of diverse, socioeconomic backgrounds able to study and learn and bring astrology forward into the future. So please do take advantage of that. All right. On that note, I am very glad to be looking at this eclipse today. Eclipse season is always, for me anyway, as I've observed this, 14 years of doing full-time astrology, eclipse season is always when my views of any content I make, well, back when it was written, it was the same way. The views, the clicks, the likes, the shares, whatever, they go through the roof. Why? Because people, not only are eclipses sort of ominous and people are like, ooh, eclipses, but they also they're very powerful, and most people really notice how they feel. Alongside of that, for example, Mercury retrogrades. Why are some of these events, eclipses and Mercury retrogrades, some of the types of astrological events to seep through the boundaries of the skeptical mind? And you find that even news anchors occasionally talk about Mercury retrograde now. Why? because it's noticeable. It's like you can't deny it. I remember when I started working, let me stop screen sharing for a second. I remember when I started working as a social worker in a residence home for adults who had various mental health diagnoses, and they were living there. And I was they were my clients, and I was a social worker, and I remember the doctors on staff who are, I would just describe them, very nice people, very like empirical, rational minded. And they would say, no, hands down, even the Franciscan priests that were my bosses, who are like, Catholic and mystical in their own way, but they're not exactly like into astrology. And they would be like, by far the most decompensations that we see, and this is all of the adults in the community were diagnosed with schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorders, I believe they're called. I'm not sure what the terminology is these days. If I no longer have the right terminology, I apologize. Anyhow, they would say, by far around the full moons, we see the most decompensation, meaning mental health crises, events, and like hospitalizations and things like that. And I always thought that was interesting. And it was funny because at that time I was just starting to study astrology. And by the way, that Franciscan community that I was a part of as a therapist, so that happened to be taking place while the North Node was traveling through Pisces in my 11th house. So funny that I'm bringing that up. That was another element of community that I was involved in my 11th. But there was, I'd bring in my astrology book. I'd be sitting at my desk, like reading my astrology books, like in some of the downtimes during the day when I was just like on call at the residence home. And everyone would make fun of me, except everyone would always offer that caveat. Well, but the full moons, and I think that's true with like I've heard police officers have said that before. Like, for example, one of my coworkers was a former police officer, and she said, well, yeah, we used to notice that around, in amongst her colleagues, the other officers. And there was someone said something about the ER being busy. Even my mom, who's like a psychiatric nurse practitioner, she's not so, I mean, she's open to astrology because I do it, right? But she would even say, yeah, full moons are a little wild when it comes to like the ICU earlier in her career. Or so anyway, it's a thing. Eclipses are a thing. And they are one of the most palpable, like tangible examples of astrology that we live with, which is why everything goes through the roof around eclipses. You can feel them. You will notice them. They will have an effect. You can set your clock to them. So that's exciting. And I think one of the things that comes to my mind about this, given that that's the case, is that it really helps to get a variety of different perspectives, which is why I thought to do horoscopes today. I was like, you know what? It doesn't hurt to just get a little bit more perspective on how this might be affecting you personally. I mean, we went through some of the major archetypes of the eclipse yesterday, and I think that's helpful to do. But, it helps to just get a variety of interpretations about the placement in a chart, right? I recommend, again, your rising sign, but we're going to go through these 1 through 12, and I'm just going to tell you some of the things I think. But before I do so, a few reminders about the lunar eclipse in Pisces that we covered yesterday. 5 things that this eclipse will generally bring. One is a romantic and spiritual impulse. This is a full moon in Pisces, lunar eclipse with Neptune. There is a sense of karma that is blossoming. We talked about that yesterday. And this karmic blossoming amplifies the romantic and spiritual impulses for otherworldliness, for bliss, for ecstasy, for forgiveness, surrender, compassion. Number 2 is that there is a collective urge or pull. Often Neptune, like an ocean of water, and the way water runs down the hill and gathers into puddles or gathers into ponds or lakes or streams, there is a sense of wanting to join with other people who have similar values or impulses. This is going to have a big effect on our relationships insofar as we're looking and saying, look, if my relationship doesn't feature enough emotional, psychological, spiritual, romantic unity, then I'm going to start seeking that, or I'm going to feel dissatisfied. We're going to look at themes like illusions versus reality with a strong Neptune signature. Sometimes the same impulse that we see as spiritual, romantic, blissful, otherworldly is also rooted in some level of unhealthy escapism or lack of groundedness. And so disillusionment and the distinction between dreams, fantasies, and reality can become pronounced around an eclipse like this. The subsequent balancing of relationships that happens because of these impulses being amplified is highlighted by the fact that we have Venus, the ruler of the South Node, in the sign of the South Node in Libra, the place of the balance in a sign of balancing relationships. And the next eclipse following on this full moon, the next new moon will be a solar eclipse in Libra, while Venus is in Scorpio, suggesting that whatever these impulses are that are coming through right now, these Neptunian and watery Piscean impulses, the way they affect us will immediately have an impact on a balancing in relationships, a change or shift in priorities, or a renegotiating of the karmic contracts that we have with other people. And then number 5, this eclipse, following this eclipse, we see a ton of water. We see Mars in Cancer, Saturn in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces, Venus moving into Scorpio. We're starting to see the congregation of planets in a grand water trine, not exact, but pretty close, following this eclipse, which is a very watery eclipse. And so we just see a strong signature of emotionality and of exploring emotional depths, of emotional honesty and maturity, and the need for greater emotional vulnerability or healing that follows closely after this eclipse within the next month. So those are 5 things to keep in mind as we're going through these horoscopes, because almost every horoscope here, I'll probably tap into one of those themes as I'm, kind of creatively working through the 12 signs. Okay. Gatorade. Not official sponsor of the show, and that is filled with water. Okay, let's go. Okay, here's the chart. Start with Aries. So for Aries, I'm going to just say whatever comes to my mind. These are not pre-scripted. I sat with them for maybe 2 minutes each prior to starting this today during my prep time, and kind of got a little bit of a sense of what I want to say. And I'm just going to roll with it. So I hope that some of these will land for you. But remember, if you want like several more takes, go back to September's horoscopes with Alex and Dana, because you'll get a few more takes as well. So for Aries, I look at this and I can't help but notice that while this is a 12th house lunar eclipse, you have the North Node in your first house and have had it in the first house for a while. The theme of individuation is very pronounced when the North Node goes through the first house. Who are you becoming? How are you changing physically, psychologically? What emphasis is there on personal growth and identity transformation? When the North Node is in the first house, those are the kinds of things to watch for. South Node's been in your 7th, amplifying changes and crystallized insights and the reaping of what's been sown around relationships and the give and take and balancing that happens in relationships. So that those themes are still processing. You've got a solar eclipse coming up in your 7th house of relationships. So this eclipse, interestingly, I think will be tied pretty closely to some pretty big shifts in relationships. Now, the 12th house suggests that we're going into a space that's rather unconscious for Aries. So that unconscious space, it's oceanic. It is not easily seen or understood. So it's a little bit like misty or foggy in that 12th house, but there are deep, emotional, romantic, otherworldly yearnings and longings that are seeking expression in you or through you. But it's important that they be the right ones, that they not be regressive or needy or addictive or codependent, and that you tap into your deepest yearnings and longings emotionally right now for the sake of continued personal growth and evolution. And you'll notice that almost immediately upon this eclipse, you're going to see much more emphasis on these lunar eclipse realizations and how they impact your relationship subsequently. So that's like pretty important to look at the connection between 12 and then the subsequent eclipse in 7 for Aries. So that's what I would look at for you Aries folks. Unconscious material, getting in touch with deep, hidden, maybe rather inaccessible yearnings or longings, finding healthy ways of incorporating them into your ongoing process of self-discovery and personal growth, and then watching how they impact relationships in the next month. All right, let's go to Taurus. So this is my home sign, and this one's pretty easy for me because I can extrapolate from things that I'm thinking about, But for Taurus risings, we see the lunar eclipse taking place in the 11th house. This really puts an emphasis on who we want to have around us as allies, friends. What are the right types of groups or communities In what way is the landscape of our social lives or our community lives changing? Who do we consider to be the best kinds of allies or friends that share the right kinds of values or that have the same kind of empathy or compassion or emotional maturity? And also, are we we're looking at the possibility for seeing things clearly. I've been deluded. I haven't been seeing things clearly, and now I am with respect to things like groups, friends, colleagues, allies, and so forth. This is also about the kind of collective that you feel like you're a part of or that you need to be a part of for the sake of your personal growth and development. I would say that one of the things that we have to consider in this is that this is also connected intimately to Uranus in your first house and Pluto in your ninth, that collection of outer planets that suggest continued development of philosophy, religion, beliefs, paradigms, and also personal revolution in the first house. So a very interesting moment, a very powerful moment where the overlap between ongoing Plutonian events around higher understanding, wisdom, religion, philosophy, personal evolution with Uranus in the first, and a shift in the landscape of your social life, groups, communities, allies, and friends are all taking place. So that's what I'm looking at for Tauruses. For Geminis, to me, this one is anytime you get the eclipse in an angular house, it's pretty loud. Right? They were actually called loud or busy places, the first, 10th, 7th, and 4th houses. This is the place that suggests your public identity, your professional or your profession or vocation, your reputation in the world, and either looking to incorporate more of that otherworldly, romantic, spiritual impulse within the expression of your career, right? Or looking at the ways in which your spiritual, the spiritual dimension of who you are needs to find healthier avenues for expression within your career. Like a lot of people come into astrology readings saying, I feel like I'm this really spiritual person. I'm kind of wired this way. And yet it's like I have to completely compartmentalize that when I go to work every day. And some of that's normal, right? That's just life. But I suspect that for Geminis, especially with Jupiter in your first house, and Jupiter is the ruler of Saturn in the 10th, and we have this ongoing Jupiter-Saturn square, I suspect that there is some desire to shape or shift identity with a greater awareness of what you long for or wish for or hope for or desire spiritually. And in a sense, bringing more of your imagination and the romantic spiritual impulse into the career. There's some need to reshape and shift career and identity so that the two have more in common or are more intimately connected. I think that this is an ongoing project. You'll also see spike in December when Jupiter and Saturn square again. Saturn in the 10th is so often about what isn't right about your career, what is exhausting or taxing, or where you're feeling like stuck or a little stagnant, and you've reached the limits or expiration date of some particular mode or way of being in your career or your public or social facing self. And Jupiter in the first squaring Saturn thus says, well, I have this bubbling sense of newness inside of me, this growth that's happening inside of me. It's very stimulating, very exciting. And yet it's in this kind of confrontational dance with Saturn in the 10th where I'm feeling like things are falling flat, or I need to do something to bring more inspiration and feelings of unity or happiness or bliss, the high Piscean exalted qualities. I need to bring more of those into my career. But in order to do so, there's a big restructuring that has to happen and a deeper honoring of myself in relation to what I'm doing with my life. All right. So let's go forward to Cancer, where we see this lunar eclipse taking place in the 9th house. Now, to me, this is really interesting because Saturn in the 9th can be, for anyone, can be about a couple of things. One, it can be about a period of time in which you're getting much more serious about faith, spirituality, learning, education, expanding your horizons through travel or pilgrimage. And yet we have also the kind of the polar opposite themes where rather than getting real serious and focused about those things, there's a sense of disconnect. There's a sense of not being able to connect with a higher truth, a higher power, a philosophy, a religious or spiritual practice. It's as though you're wandering for a period of time and dealing with doubts or dryness spiritually. And so Saturn in the ninth for some people will coincide with periods where their spiritual life is somewhat stagnant, or sometimes people will go through periods of time where it's like overly serious or rigid. Either way, a lunar eclipse in this house suggests something reaching a place of finality and something reaching a place of blossoming. There's a lot of history behind this for you, Cancers. And in that, there is a call to greater inspiration. Now, it's like if Saturn in Pisces has been a little bit like, well, for example, if it's been either extreme, rigid, fanatical, or if it's been really dry and dead. Either way, Neptune brings it to life. Neptune says, you've been too rigid. There needs to be more softness and generosity of spirit. Probably more likely for Cancers, the opposite, where it'll say, if things have been dry, if you've been feeling disconnected, if there's not been a great emotional sense of connectivity to your beliefs, to your belief system, to spirituality, etc., this is something that will start to reinvigorate that. But why? Because North Node's about to move into Pisces in the ninth. Saturn's about to finish in Pisces in the ninth. There's rejuvenation spiritually and maybe even intellectually that's about to happen. And this serves as the gateway between a period of maybe dryness or wandering and reinvigoration, and sort of like a gentle rain that's coming in. And it's a spring rain, right? Saturn, the Lord of Winters, is about to leave. So in the next year or so, we're going to see Saturn move on. And this eclipse is almost like a transitional eclipse that suggests waves of inspiration and more of that beautiful, uplifting Piscean dimension of things flowing back into your life. I suspect for Cancers that this may coincide with having to look very deeply at your own needs, your own feelings, your own body, your own psychic and emotional health, because you also have Mars in its fall in Cancer transiting the first house. So it is as though hitting your own edges right now is intimately tied to the need for rejuvenation spiritually or intellectually. Some greater container to help you understand what you're going through and maybe some of the turbulent feelings you're dealing with. More vulnerable places too, like home and family, could come up for Mars, with Mars and Cancer in your first. All right, let's move along to Leo. When I look at this one, I think, okay, an 8th house lunar eclipse. And we have, for example, the other major transit that's perfecting at the time is Mercury opposite Saturn across the 2nd and 8th. To me, this is about a moment of forgiveness or the clearing of debts. This is about who and what we owe our emotional allegiance to and who owes their emotional allegiance to us. It is about a balancing within relationships. And it's also about a crossroad where important decisions have to be made about what is mine, what is yours, what is shared, what is owed, what is expected. And also, can we set each other free from various obligations or expectations? Can we forgive debts? Can we let go of various karmic contracts that are not needed anymore, and let go of grudges? For this combination, I also think about like financial issues too, right? 2nd and 8th house both have a lot to do with money. So I think about shifts around money and loans, paying off debts, new investments, shifting or changing strategies with respect to money or assets within relationships. These are some of the key things that come to my mind right now. And what I would also be very aware of with Mars and Cancer in your 12th house is the potential for some level of coercion to be taking place. This could suggest, for example, that you're being driven by guilt to give to other people more than you have, or that you are using guilt or some form of coercion emotionally to get or like procure what you need from other people. And I would just be careful of sort of underlying unconscious motivations and emotional manipulation that's happening beneath the surface. That's something to be aware of for Leos. All right, let's go to Virgo. For Virgo, we see that this eclipse is taking place in your 7th house, which is the place of relationships. And Mercury Saturn opposing across the 1st and 7th, to me suggests that you're at a place of negotiation. You're coming to the table with someone else to talk or discuss or look at the terms, and maybe there's some serious conversations that are being had. Maybe you're also recognizing the limits of yourself or someone else within the context of a relationship, any kind of relationship, but maybe love and intimate relationships come to mind. This is also about the perhaps the emphasis on dissolving, trusting, surrendering, merging, as opposed to remaining separate and apart through rational defense mechanisms. I mean, a lunar eclipse with Neptune and Pisces in the 7th could be calling you to simply merge or join with a deeper level of faith and trust in a partner, in a love. I think that this is also connected to the potential for a new and liberating mindset. If you or a partner have a very stuck or limited or restrictive way of thinking about each other or about life, this could be a moment where you're finding that there's some need to loosen up. I say this also because this Sun will oppose Neptune shortly after the eclipse, trine Uranus in the 9th house, all of which suggests the potential for some breakthroughs around how you think and how your thought patterns affect and communication patterns affect relationships. Or also, again, one thing that comes to mind would be the difference between fantasy or illusions and not seeing something clearly, and obviously the way things are in reality. So, we need some balance between the imaginal and the real. They're in a tension and a dialogue with one another always, and they need to be in our relationships in a good place as well. Okay, so that's for Virgos. That's what comes to my mind. Let's go to Libras. So for Libras, this lunar eclipse takes place in your 6th house, excuse me. And we also see the north node of the moon about to shift signs going into the 6th house. There's been a lot of emphasis on the development of relationships and the ability of, relationships that help us individuate. Libra is a sign that on the rising is so anchored in harmony, diplomacy. You're a relational and sensitive, socially poised being by nature. The Aries North Node suggests that certain key relationships come into our lives in order to help us individuate, to be more ourselves. There has to be some tension held between the socially poised diplomatic part of a Libra and the kind of, what do I want to say it? Like uninhibited individualist. And so relationships have been helping that part of you evolve, we might say, with the North Node moving through your 7th house. That's key because what we're actually looking at here then has to do with the 6th house in relation to those themes. So the 6th house is a place of sacrifice and work and labor and effort. And in the 6th house with Pisces, there's an aversion to the 1st house in Libra. Although they both have Venus as a ruler, the exaltation ruler of Pisces. And so what we're really seeing in the 6th house is like the kinds of sacrifices or longings or desires or romantic or spiritual impulses that are irrational. But compared to the scales of Libra, which is like this perfectly balanced, architect living in the ivory towers of the gods. Like Libra, also the exaltation of Saturn, right? It's a sign that is so calculated and precise and fair and balanced. Pisces is more like just dive irrationally into the ocean, and you don't know what's in there. It's mysterious, it's deep, it's not rational, and it's Dionysian. It'll tear you apart, but you need to go into that space. There's something here that thus suggests to me that some level of dissolution, of surrender, of sacrifice, and of the irrational pull is needed right now for the sake of continued growth and evolution. And that could be found in terms of dealing with someone in your life who's sick, or going through a period of time where things are not exactly in your control, or there are very overwhelming circumstances. But these circumstances help you to add something that doesn't come as easily, which is an appreciation for that which can't be balanced and measured. It can't be contained or controlled. It can only be surrendered to. But when we surrender to it, there comes this kind of understanding. It's not a rational understanding. It's an instinctual, intuitive kind of understanding. So the difficulties of accepting this are implied right now for Librans, Libra risings, but uh, trust and surrender will yield good results here. And this is continued part of the growth journey of individuating that we see. Um, so that's what comes to my mind for Librans. All right, let's go ahead to Scorpio. So for Scorpio, we see the lunar eclipse in the fifth house. And the lunar eclipse with Neptune, of course, in the fifth is highly creative. The fifth house is called the joy of Venus. It's the place of pleasure, creativity, and creative fulfillment, which is why it's also connected with childbirth and children. But this is the house where we really look at and think about the need for creative, emotional, transcendent, blissful experiences, whether that's sexual or if it's dance or art or painting or acting, theater, music, or if we're talking about the experience of connecting with children. The aim here is to unite the creative essence with things that are transcendent and beautiful and romantic and fulfilling. Now, this impulse with Saturn there may need to be separated from unhealthy or regressive versions of that same pull. For example, drugs or alcohol, sex addiction, as opposed to honoring the sexual impulse within ourselves, whatever the case might be. I'm not going to be the one who says what is or isn't healthy, but just that there is a difference between some reckless, regressive seeking of pleasure or creative fulfillment that's really coming from an inability to accept life as it is and to seek out escape from it. And then on the other hand, something rooted in an acceptance of the way things are and the need for play and creativity and spontaneity and sensual or romantic fulfillment, despite the fact that things are not always easy. We have to hold, it's like the most genuine forms of play and bliss and pleasure are actually coming from some deep level of acceptance that things are not always blissful and pleasurable, which is why so much great music that really feels good is about sad things. Think about, soul, blues, gospel, jazz. A lot of the themes are just moody, but they take the moods and they somehow transform them into beauty and pleasure and bliss. So this kind of experience is really important for Scorpios right now. I also suspect that part of the creative fulfillment here is running contrary to various social obligations or expectations. You see the Mercury-Saturn opposition across the 11th and the 5th. Virgo in the 11th is, in a sense, very aware of the right, meticulous, careful things. Scorpio is a naturally protective, very socially aware sign, sometimes a little defensive or, emotionally suspicious, right? Very protective sign. Great sign to have for, if you need protection, and also a sign that's instincts are almost always correct. However, when you look at the 11th house Virgo, for Scorpios, that means that there may also be a hyper attentiveness to the proper or right or careful things socially. It's like Virgo's wired into your 11th through sextile to the first. But this means that there will also be a way in which, in order to experience real, deep, blissful, ecstatic, and the kind of going into the sort of irrational waters of, Pisces, Neptune in the 5th house, you may have to leave behind some overly cautious, socially sensitive part of yourself that's more rational. And I wonder what kinds of tensions are coming up between that socially rational, careful, meticulous side of you and this creative part of you that needs to be honored. On the other hand, the tension Virgo provides socially is like you have duties and roles and a sense of service or obligation to the world in which you live that prevents you from being too reckless with the way in which you seek pleasure. You're not here to escape the world. You're here to be a servant. Right. So if the forms of pleasure are regressive, the Virgo part will kind of hold things in check a little bit and say, why don't you go to a 12-step? So it's an interesting tension for Scorpios that we're looking at there right now. Anyway, let's go to Sagittarius. So for Sagittarius, we see the lunar eclipse in Pisces in the 4th house. And this suggests that there is here in particular, the feeling of history really comes to mind, that the end of a cycle is being reached with respect to your ancestral, past lives, family history. This place is the roots of our chart. It is the place of parents. It is the place of our home, our dwelling place, our private inner life with roots that go into the past and our ancestral lineages. So this, to me, suggests the possibility for healing, the possibility for rest, surrender, release, culminating and dissolving things taking place around home and family, dissolving old patterns, dissolving or healing old wounds, but also the potential for the illusions or unhealthy, regressive, escapist kinds of patterns to express themselves around home and family right now. There's also a big tension at the time of this eclipse between houses 10 and 4 with Virgo and Pisces, which again suggests some split between worldly, occupational, societal sense of duty, obligation, respect, notoriety, concern for your role, your skills, your service in the world, and some need to surrender and go into these unbounded spaces of relaxation. The fourth house, called moksha in Indian philosophy, which means liberation, often as in enlightenment. But in the fourth house, it's also just releasing from the stresses and pressures of the world at the end of the day when you go home. So we're talking about some tension also between, work and rest. And that could be coming up real strongly for Sagittarians right now. I get the feeling that we are also talking about these themes because they are being activated through our relationships, that our relationships are like a little pressure point or trigger point for the tension of these opposites, because we also have Jupiter in a T-square, and we have Jupiter squaring Saturn from the 7th to 4th. So this year is in many ways for Sagittarius about revisiting or revising the way in which we are seeking out rest, relaxation, surrender, and the ongoing adventures in relationships and what they are asking from us. So we're trying to negotiate a different way of living and being and resting and releasing from the world through relationships that are also dynamic and busy. Okay, let's go to Capricorn. Capricorn, we got this in the 3rd house. And I mentioned this in the Capricorn horoscope at the beginning of the month. I'm going to mention it again. I can't help but notice that Mars is in Cancer in your 7th house. So if you're a Capricorn rising and you've got this lunar eclipse in the 3rd while Mars is debilitated in Cancer in the 7th, I really wonder about what you're starting to understand or realize that is in the environment or has been in the environment that's being revealed as troublesome or difficult. It's sort of being exposed, and you're starting to see it for what it is that comes through the person you're living with or the people that you live with, whether those are family members or spouse. The reason I say this is because the moon and Neptune in the 3rd house is very much like the fish tank that I often use to describe the 3rd house, which is the joy of the moon and the place of your local environment. Your local environment's like the fish tank. It's like your ecology that surrounds you psychically and physically. It's your neighbors and neighborhood in the ancient world in the literal sense, but it is more like the cosmic or the sort of cultural and environmental psychic fish tank in these modern days where a lot of our lives are lived online and so on. So in this case, when we have that potential for illusions versus reality to come up, and for us to be sifting through the fog to see what is real in the environment, and we see that there's this powerful signature of Mars in its fall in the 7th house in Cancer, it makes me wonder if relationships, whether those are intimate relationships or maybe even relationships with family members, are starting to help us see the water that we've been swimming in. There's this example. Someone said this recently, and I don't remember where I heard it. Maybe someone in the comment section left this. It was like, or no, who said this? I can't remember. Sorry, guys. Anyways, like two young fish are swimming along, and they run into an old fish, and he says, "Water's nice today, isn't it?" And the two fish don't say anything, and they swim on. And the young fish looks at the other and he goes, "What's water?" And I love that example because I feel like for Capricorns, the moon Neptune in the 3rd is like, hey, guess what? You're in water. Oh, really? What's the nature of this water? Oh, it's Mars in Cancer in the 7th. The reason I feel that way is because after this eclipse, Mars in Cancer will be progressing through Cancer, hitting Saturn, hitting Neptune, retrograding, going backward. And so it just suggests to me that whatever is in the environment that we're coming to see clearly, an influence. Neptune, it can be like the sensitive, subtle things that we can't see clearly, which is why it's associated with things like yearning and longing, things that are rather intangible. while intangible stuff in the environment connected to this ongoing Mars transit in the 7th suggests to me that it's family dynamics, relationship dynamics that are permeating the atmosphere, and you're going to become more and more aware of it. It could mean that leads to a shift in relationships and a shift in environment. But that's how I'm seeing it for Capricorns. Now, I'm going to go to Aquarius next, and that places the lunar eclipse in the 2nd house, a place that has to do with the cultivation and development of your own resources, money, skills, abilities, anything you can rely on or use that props you up and supports you, that in time you cultivate and develop, like things that take a while to grow in a garden. So here we see in the 2nd house the culminating lunar eclipse with Neptune, and that makes me wonder if a resource or an asset that we have used in the past is about to dissolve, or if we're about to go through some kind of transition with respect to what we have, what we're in possession of, what skills we use, why we're using them, how we're using them. This is like a sea change with respect to assets and resources. On the other hand, I could see this as a kind of visionary shift in the landscape of money and finances. You'll see that sometimes coincide with people launching some kind of Neptunian business. Or also maybe facing the difference between illusion and reality with respect to things like money, with respect to things like what works and what doesn't work with respect to business or money. Excuse me. I also wonder about the opposition that's forming between Saturn and Mercury across the 2nd and 8th houses, because this also would imply that we're having maybe some difficult conversations with other people, or reaching some kind of impasse or point of negotiation or resolution of conflicts or differing values, or looking at who's expected and obligated to what, and how our finances are obligated or involved with other people. So things like debt as well, and the paying off of debts comes to my mind. All right. Well, I think we'll, and the other thing I will mention for Aquarian, sorry, one more thing. I'll give you one extra because I didn't forget. We were running out of time and I didn't pitch into the Aquarius statements in September's video, and I heard from a number of Aquarians about it. So sorry, guys. But here's an extra little thought. The fact that the solar eclipse is forming in your 9th house coming up suggests to me that you could be that part of this stuff that's going on around assets, resources, and finances. It feels like it's closely involved with the need or desire to study things, or to go back to school, or to be finishing some process of education, or be distilling or refining your abilities through a process of learning that's been going on, or the need for a shift in approach or the development of new or different skills, again, through higher education. This could also be that there's some shift in philosophy or beliefs or religion or spirituality that is having a direct impact on things like money and business. So for Aquarians, I see some of that coming up as well. All right, finally, Pisces. If you are a Pisces rising, we have the conjunction with the moon and Neptune that is taking place at the lunar eclipse in your 1st house. Now, this to me is really interesting because we have the subsequent eclipse in the 8th. So 1st and 8th house dynamics often have to do with liberating ourselves from entanglements with other people. So a lunar eclipse in your 1st house is maybe about a time of transition with respect to your sense of identity, your sense of health, prioritizing or understanding your own needs or desires or wishes, hopes and longings and aspirations, and getting really clear about them. And then boom, 8th house eclipses could immediately signify that by getting clear about your own dreams, desires, needs, longings, that there is immediate adjustments that need to be made in various relationships. That those relationships, the give and take of those relationships, needs to shift in order to accommodate the very clear sense of what you're longing for or desiring that is coming to the surface at the time of the lunar eclipse. Another way of looking at this would be that we have to get grounded here and be careful about what we are deluding ourselves about. So like, what are your own fantasies, projections, and what are your illusions when it comes to understanding who you are, right? We can delude ourselves, or we can get lost in the fog or not see ourselves clearly. And any inability to do that, or any way in which we're evading or trying to escape responsibility for our own authentic needs or character will immediately be there'll be like a instant karmic effect within our relationships and the balancing of the scales in relationships to the extent that we're not getting real about something. So those are some of the things that I see for Pisces. Okay, we will leave it there. I hope that this has been useful and interesting for all of you. I feel like with eclipses, it can't hurt to do a second round of horoscopes because different takes, different angles always will, touch a few people that maybe didn't resonate with the first round of horoscopes because there's so many different angles you can take on how the archetypes show up. So I hope this was in service to all of you today. Don't forget, after I sign off, you can listen to an informational video about the Year 1 program, everything it includes, why it's a great program to take. It starts on November 16th. Need-based tuition is available, so be sure that when you go over to the website, nightlightastrology.com, go to the first year course page. You'll see at the bottom the sale rates if you are just regular registration. Those are available till October 15th, and then otherwise, we have need-based tuition available all the way up until the start of the class in November. So you can kind of pick your own price that works within your budget if you are in need. So please do use that. We welcome people to utilize that. A great signature for studying astrology, as Pluto will go back into Aquarius right as the program starts. So that's it for today. We'll see you again soon. Bye. Hey, everyone. I'm glad that you're sticking around to hear more about the Year 1 program that's coming up. The program starts on November 16th of this fall. And I am here today to tell you all that the program includes and why I think you really like it if you're thinking about studying astrology. So a few practical details about the course as well. The class begins November 16th, as I mentioned, but it takes place on Saturdays from 12 to about 2 or 3 p.m. Eastern time. So that's 11 to 2 Central, and typically classes are about 2 hours long. Sometimes they run over with Q&A and discussion, but you can always plan for about 2 hours and you won't miss any of the actual lecture content for the day. You may have to duck out a little early if Q&A or discussion is extending. Sometimes it does, which is why we say between 2 and 3 hours, but typically it's around 2. All of the classes are recorded, so if you can't attend live, you are more than welcome to watch the recordings at your own pace and on your own time. You have lifetime access to the recordings, and everything is housed on a student website. I want to actually give you a just a little preview of what that student website looks like. So I am going to open up my own version of Thinkific, which is the platform that we use. So here's are some of my courses. These are all the Nightlight courses I teach. You can see on the page. But I'm going to tune into, let's go to Nightlight 28, which is the section that began in June of 2024. So here you're going to see that we have orientation instructions, course information, class links, and calendar. Everything that you need to know how to access the course is there. And you'll have a version of this in your own panel that you get set up with when you enroll. And then our lessons are laid out. So lesson 1, we have the video, the audio, the slides, the transcript. We have the Q&A box transcript so you can see what people were saying in the chat box during class. We have flashcards. We have a workbook. We have planet and sign glyph flashcards. We have bonus material, videos that we like from YouTube that we link you to. Say, check this video out, check that video out. They go along with some of the things we talked about in class. So every lesson has material for you to go as far as you want with, but the main thing is the video, audio, slides, transcript, etc. are all listed there so that you can download and watch it on your own time if you can't attend live. Again, the live classes do happen on Saturdays for this cohort, starting November 16th. That is our first day of class. And then going forward, it always meets on Saturdays, and we give you the class schedule to map out. And the breaks that we have, the study sessions that we have, everything's mapped out on the class calendar for you. So those are just a few practical details that, just to kind of start us off with. So I'm going to take you over to the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. And I'm going to share with you some information about the program and sort of walk you through what it includes and what you can expect. So it is an almost year-long program. We typically finish between 10 and 11 months out of the year. It can depend a little bit on some of my teaching and scheduling, because sometimes I teach at conferences and it may delay some of our modules by a week or something like that. But it's typically around 10 to 11 months that the program lasts. So we call it our first year program. At Nightlight, we have a program for absolute beginners. You may want to check that out if you are like brand spanking new. That would be 8 to 10 hours of content that's really meant to set you up for the first year course. We sort of assume that if you're coming into the first year program, you already know a little bit about astrology. For example, you have some familiarity with the signs, planets, and houses. Maybe you know what aspects are, but you want to learn more about what they are. But if you are really at the very total entry level space, then try Astrology for Beginners. And when you take that, you could do that right away and then join the first year course in November, and you'd be perfectly set up for it. But anyhow, in this program, over the course of about a year, we work through 30 lessons that I lead. And those lessons are all 2 to 3 hours each, including lecture, a little break, and a Q&A portion where we open up for people to come on mic and camera and ask questions and have an interactive discussion about the material for the day. The program is broken into modules that cover a variety of topics in ancient Hellenistic astrology. That is the earliest era of horoscopic astrology. And so if you don't know a lot about the different schools of astrology, Hellenistic astrology is going to be the kind of astrology that you see a lot of astrologers practicing nowadays. It's become more popular in the last 30 years or so. And that is due to the fact that a lot of ancient texts with some of the original techniques of horoscopic astrologers were recently translated into the English language, and it's created this renaissance in terms of the use of ancient approaches to astrology. I have a background in modern psychological, archetypal, and evolutionary astrology, and so of course I bring those things to the table, but the course is primarily focused on the excavation of ancient techniques and the spiritual philosophy that ancient astrologers also espoused. The closest thing that I can tell you to what that looks like is, ask this question: do you resonate with the philosophy that you hear me take on my YouTube channel? If so, then you're going to love this course in terms of its philosophical and spiritual approach, because the spiritual approach to astrology that I teach is really at the heart of the program. And that's a big part of my life. I approach astrology from a spiritual standpoint. It doesn't belong to one religion or one particular school of thought, but you will hear me talking about things like the soul, the belief in the transmigration of the soul. You'll hear me talk about the need to be soul-centered in our client approach to counseling in astrology. You'll hear me have an appreciation for psychological dimensions of astrology, but also ancient astrology is really very, very good at developing your predictive capacity. We talk about what kinds of predictions are appropriate, how to make appropriate predictions, how to be the right kind of astrologer for our clients without inducing any fear. So there's a lot of care that goes into the development of this craft. But ancient astrology is really amazing when it comes to honing your predictive abilities. And then what you'll find is in this program, there's also a pretty significant emphasis on the psychological dimensions and client care. Anyhow, we go into the roots of ancient Hellenistic astrology and its techniques in this program, and the 30 classes are broken into modules. We work through the history and philosophy. We work through planets, houses, signs, aspects, essential and accidental dignities, and then we get into approaches to the delineation of natal charts. And then at the end of the program, almost a third of the program is dedicated to live client readings, where you're going to see me meet with a person and apply what we've been studying for an hour-long reading. We take a break, we come back, and then we workshop. How did I do that? Why did I make these choices? How did I handle this or that came up in the reading? And it becomes easily the favorite part for most students of the entire program, because by that point, you've got so much theory that you're really ready to see it put into action. We alternate those live client practice sessions with hands-on practice, where students get to bring chart questions into class that we work on. And that's also something that most people really love. A lot of people will look at the curriculum and say, well, I already know planets, houses, and signs and aspects and dignities. But not if you haven't studied Hellenistic astrology, because the approach that ancient astrologers had to these topics is vastly different from the approach that modern astrologers take. So you will be, in a sense, relearning basic things in a brand new way. And I think a much more enriching, deep, and philosophically clear way. It's really nice to know the why behind things. This program and Hellenistic astrology in general is very good at helping you understand the why behind everything that we do. Also, it's really important to participate when you study astrology in a living lineage. So one of the reasons I don't let people jump ahead to my second or third year programs is because I want you to be entrained to a lineage, a particular way of doing things that comes from an astrologer who has a very living, busy, active practice and who has had teachers themselves. I think that's important for astrological learning. That's the model that my own learning take. And so that's what I really want students to take away from my programs. Anyhow, so all of that aside, the second year program focuses, after we build our understanding of the basic delineation techniques of birth charts, in year 2, we move into timing techniques, which is all about when the karma of a birth chart is going to be active and expressing itself throughout the course of a lifetime. That's year 2. Year 3 focuses on the development of counseling skills at a much deeper level. And then we also have a 1-year horary program, which is about the development of a very specific predictive technique that can be a really amazing tool to add to your kit. That is 4 years worth of training programs that we have. However, I want to mention that many people take our classes just for the sake, purely for the sake of their own personal growth. Taking these programs is very much like being taught how to utilize a technology that for yourself will be deeply useful for the rest of your life, and maybe for close friends or family members around you. Many people come through our programs taking that benefit away. We'll study through all 4 years of our programs with no intention of being professional. This is their hobby. This is a spiritual tool that will have it will pay dividends over a long period of time. However, many people without the intention to practice come into our courses and discover that they're actually good at it and may end up reading for other people part-time. And then there are students who are deeply, intensely motivated to practice for other people. And it is not that our programs really make those people successful. Our programs contribute to your development, but it really is that some people have a calling to practice professionally. And these programs are designed to give you all the tools you need to develop that confidence and to develop a really coherent set of tools and to entrain yourself to a lineage, which you can also develop your own unique style out of. So those are some of the kinds of people that take our programs, you might say. So the 30 classes on the year are then broken into modules. And in between modules, we have 2 course directors who are present in all of the classes, and they lead breakout tutoring sessions where you can come in and review or ask questions about the module that we've just completed, which is usually anywhere between 2 and 3 classes each. So those breakout study sessions led by our tutors are outside of the 30 classes and very useful. A lot of people like to attend those because they also offer opportunity for community and just lively conversation. We also have 12 online webinar classes led by guest teachers that we host throughout the year. Those are free, and if you can't make them live, they're all uploaded into your student folder. You also have an interactive group forum discussion staffed with tutors who typically respond to questions that you have about the material within 24 hours. So if you can't attend a tutoring session or you just have a random question on a Tuesday night, you can pop it in there and you'll get an answer. We also have a ton of bonus material, optional quizzes, flashcards, tons of supplemental material that is there to help people go as deeply as they want. We have a reading list that is expansive. And that reading list, we don't expect anyone to accomplish. It's more so a resource that we give you saying, here, if you want to know all the things I've read, if you want to know all the things that I love, if you want to know all the things I recommend, here's a master list of everything for each lesson. You could go, PhD level if you wanted to and read thousands and thousands of pages, or you might find that there's just one extra book that looks really interesting and you want to pick it up. But we pride ourselves on making sure you have a ton of resources. You have lifetime access to all the class recordings. You can email our staff or me throughout the year with questions, and my staff will also defer to me in the case that they don't know the answer to a question. So that is what the program includes. It starts November 16th. If you would like to join, at the bottom between now and October 15th, our early bird payments are available. So that saves you some money off the cost of the course. There is a 12-month installment plan that is cheaper than our normal plan, a one-time payment that's significantly cheaper than our normal one-time payment. So you get these little sales that we do until October 15th. We also have need-based tuition assistance. So if you are someone who would like to take this program, but you are on a fixed or tight budget, we have an application there. Click apply now. Just tell us what you need. We give a range. We say between this dollar amount and this dollar amount, what can you spend? And then we set you up with a plan for that tuition number per month. And that is available for anyone. We ask people to apply early because those spots are limited, but we are really accommodating. We try to make sure that nobody's priced out of a spiritual education. Like, this topic should be very accessible for people because I believe that the divine is speaking through the sky, and like anyone should have access to understanding what it's saying, right? So anyway, that is a bit about the program. I hope that this has been useful for you. If there are any questions you have, you can look over the curriculum content on the page, on the year one page. There's more information there. Check out the FAQ section for more questions. Email us info@nightlightastrology.com. And I hope to see some of you in class soon. I think this is going to be a really powerful program because it's also starting right as Pluto's moving into Aquarius. And within the year, we're going to have a Uranus-Pluto trine with Uranus in Gemini. These Aries signatures and the connection between Uranus and Pluto make for a very powerful year to advance our understanding of astrology. So it's a great election year for studying. And I hope to see some of you in class soon.